Podía hacerlo porque él estaba.
Jane Doe is a sexual assault victim, so we are not revealing her real name. She says she can't drive by Kaiser's medical offices in Union City without remembering her doctor appointment there in 2017 and Kaiser ex-employee Efrain Castanon.
Completamente.
Absolutely everything about the moment of the assault.
As a Kaiser medical aide for more than a decade, Castanon was only authorized to provide basic patient care, like administering prescriptions and managing paperwork. Jane Doe says she was shocked when she was alone with him in an exam room and his questions got very personal.
He started asking me about my ring, if I was engaged. He locked the door. When I went to grab my purse, he came up from behind and held my hand. He made me touch his private part.
Castanon was convicted of sexual battery against Jane Doe in 2018, but new court filings and internal Kaiser documents reviewed by NBC Bay Area show accusations that Castanon had a long list of victims. He viewed nurse-themed porn on his work computer and still stayed on the job. According to documents filed in the lawsuit, there were at least 6 other alleged victims of Castanon while he worked at Kaiser. In 2013, a Kaiser patient said Castanon physically examined her when he wasn't trained or authorized to, cupping her breast and touching other parts of her body. She said she reported the abuse to her Kaiser provider. In 2015, another Kaiser patient says Castanon told her he wanted to stay in the room and watch her undress. She said she reported him. Kaiser concluded Castanon's behavior was inappropriate, but he continued to work with female patients. In 2016, 1 month before Jane Doe's attack, Castanon was accused of sexual battery. It's unclear if it involved a patient. The misdemeanor charge was dismissed as part of his plea deal in Jane Doe's case. So why was Castanon still working at Kaiser and with patients for so long?
Has there been any complaints or anything said about any behaviors that...
Police body cam video obtained by our unit shows what his supervisor may or may not have known at the time. You hear an officer speaking with her shortly after Jane Doe's attack.
I haven't had any formal reports of any unusual behavior. One patient who just said, I just feel uncomfortable with male medical assistant. I touch him fully with the patient.
The way that Kaiser and Kaiser-related entities are organized, it seems like there's a real silo.
Attorney Micha Liberty represents Jane Doe in the ongoing civil case against Kaiser.
But when there's no coordination and there's no one tracking silo to silo, department to department, things fall through the cracks.
Kaiser declined our request for an on-camera interview. Instead, they sent us a long statement saying, in part, "We failed to live up to our commitment. When it happened, we acted quickly to terminate the employee and cooperated fully with law enforcement. But our goal is to prevent such things from ever happening in the first place. And we didn't do that this time. We should have recognized behaviors earlier and acted sooner."
In this special Insider Exclusive Justice in America, Jane Doe's Story network TV special, our news team sits down with Micha Star Liberty, owner of Liberty Law, author and prominent advocate for human and consumer rights in Oakland, California, who not only represented her client, Jane Doe, a Kaiser patient, and successfully settled this case for a confidential amount, but more importantly, she exposed the negligence of the Kaiser Foundation hospitals and Kaiser Foundation health plan in failing to act despite multiple warnings about serious and multiple complaints of their employee, Efrain Castanon. He was later convicted of sexual battery in a separate criminal trial and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The extremely rare Kaiser public statement acknowledging its failure in recognizing and addressing harassment and vowing to improve its policies and processes was an unexpected admission and underscores the impact of Jane Doe's case. Micha has earned a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents individuals and families and repeatedly wins. She has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Area and throughout California. She's built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down, and her amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide her clients with the results help they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Oakland, California. It is my great honor to produce Micha Star Liberty to the show. Welcome to the show, Micha.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You are much more than a lawyer. You're an advocate. And you have a background that goes back over 20 years advocating for the rights of sexual abuse victims.
Yeah, so human trafficking, if you can believe it or not, wasn't illegal until about 2 decades ago. There weren't any federal statutes prohibiting the trafficking of human beings. And what we have seen over the past 20 years is a proliferation of women and children, predominantly, that's what the statistics show, being trafficked in person. And now we're seeing it online so much more than ever. Just to give you a sense of the statistics, when we talk about the trafficking of child pornography, or what we call CSAM, child sexual abuse material, 10,000 images are uploaded of CSAM material every 12 hours. 10,000 images. And one can go through the entire human trafficking cycle on social media platforms, and that's what's happening these days.
And I understand you're almost ready to file a case on that, right?
Part of a multi-district litigation here in Oakland, helping protect or trying to get accountability and trying to get protection for children who have suffered at the hands of social media, allowing this kind of imagery and trafficking to continue.
Today we are here to talk about a case that you brought against Kaiser Foundation, Kaiser Healthcare. Tell our audience a little bit about this case.
I represented a wonderful, very strong woman. She is bilingual, but Spanish was her primary language. She was working for a maid service, and doing that kind of, back-breaking work caused back problems. So she started to go see her doctor for an industrial injury to deal with her back pain. Unbeknownst to her, that doctor's medical assistant was a sexual predator, and he would try to flirt with her at visits. He would look up information in her record, which is against Kaiser's policies and procedures. And one day he decided that he was going to lock the door behind him. When he entered the medical exam room, he pushed my client up against the examination table, lifted up her skirt, moved her underwear aside, and attempted to rape her.
And his name was what?
Efrain Castanon.
Now, he had many other complaints that were filed against him from other patients,
Correct.
or as we call it in Kaiser, members. And what did Kaiser do about it?
Nothing. What Kaiser was doing was burying this information and these complaints. So what we uncovered during the litigation was that he was targeting Spanish-speaking women, and he would contact them, flirt with them, touch their breasts inappropriately, make comments. I mean, he was assaulting these women in the examination rooms. And when they would report it, nothing would happen. It would get buried, or what's worse, from a business perspective, the people who were taking these complaints were creating shadow files, shadow HR files. So instead of going to HR and saying, we have received a complaint from a member that this man, Efrain Castanon, groped her breasts during an examination, instead of reporting that to HR, they were reporting it to the person who was in charge of that floor, who would keep it in a file and not share it with anyone else.
But why?
Because, when there is a need for accountability, people don't want to step up. They don't want to rock the boat. The other thing with this particular predator, and we see this with a lot of predators, he's gregarious. The doctors and the nurses referred to him as being handsome and friendly. So he was kind of like the cool kid on the block, and they were not interested in going through the paperwork or the procedure to get him to stop abusing women.
How did this come to fruition, this case?
What ended up happening, and I'm so glad that we had this bit of information, because so many times when women come forward to the police and they report what happened to them, it gets swept under the rug, there's no investigation, and there are no criminal charges. Luckily, my client, as she was struggling, she thought for her life, was able to turn around, and she saw Mr. Castanon's genitalia, and he had marks on his genitalia that were unique. So she was able to tell the police what his genitalia looked like, and that was enough for them to believe her and to actually do an investigation.
So the police were actually called to the hospital, right?
They were.
That doesn't happen that often, does it?
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And this client went home and told her brother what happened. Thankfully, she was confident enough and felt secure enough to share with her brother, and he encouraged her to call the police. And so the police went out and did an investigation.
And they arrested him, right?
They did arrest him. Not immediately, but they did arrest him.
And separately, he was charged criminally, a separate case. He was convicted. I think he was sentenced to 3 years in prison.
That's correct.
Okay, but your case went on.
Yes.
Initially, and this is what I find in almost all these cases, denial, 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 right?
Absolutely.
Even though you have a police report happened before you filed your case, correct?
Correct.
Okay, even though you have a police report, there's an ongoing criminal investigation. Kaiser's position was,
it didn't happen. We have no notice. No one else has complained about this. He was likable. We had no reason to suspect.
you discovered in your discovery there other complaints have been issued.
Correct.
If they were rerouted, if you will, to someone on the floor, how did you get a hold of them?
We were able to work with the police after their investigation was over, after he was convicted and sentenced. Then they're willing to share some of the information that they got. And we tracked down every single name, every phone number, everyone we could find to talk to them. So we were able to talk to the other survivors.
Yeah. So you got the information from the police,
Correct.
not from Kaiser.
We got some confirmation from Kaiser, but yeah, the bulk of the information came from the police
When
investigation.
you're dealing with Kaiser, you're getting this so-called confirmation. Who are you getting it from?
Various witnesses who were quite reluctant.
Any
if not-
human resources?
There were human resource people who were essentially not helpful or not able to be helpful, because the way that Kaiser protects itself from liability is to have all these different silos. So one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And they would say, well, of course, if I had gotten that report, I would have done X, Y, and Z. But they didn't get the report and they didn't do X, Y, and Z.
For lack of a better word, Kaiser issued a what they call public statement, which is the equivalent of an apology. The word apology was never on that statement, was it?
No.
Okay, but they basically said they dropped the ball, right?
I've never, in my 23 years of doing this kind of work, ever seen anything like that. I was floored and happily surprised that they did the right thing and they took accountability. They said, we failed this woman.
Yeah. Let me ask you about, there's an old saying, justice delayed is justice denied, right? We see it so prevalent in our society today, where justice, where you have the facts of the case, as we know in a certain person running for office, right? And yet, we can't get to court, okay? So, in this particular case, you filed your civil suit during the time that the criminal court was processing his case, right? You discovered some information from the police, confirmed by Kaiser, correct? And you finally settled the case confidentially after Kaiser, I would imagine, issued this public statement, correct?
It was true, yeah. But what was interesting is that we were in the part of litigation where you engage in what's called a mediation. All sides sit down and they talk with a neutral. They try and resolve the case. We had mediation set up for like 2 or 3 days after we saw this apology. And so we showed up at mediation and we thought, well, this is a great start. We should be able to get justice for this client. And the mediation went nowhere. The lawyers took a much different stance than their client did.
Then what happened?
We continued to litigate and we continued to talk, and eventually we were able to resolve the case short of trial, which is always easier on the clients, especially in cases like this.
And basically, would you say this is because they can hold on to the money longer? Is that the deal?
Absolutely.
How long after the public statement was issued was the case resolved?
It took several months. One of the issues too was that this poor client, what she thought was an industrial injury turned out to be kidney disease. And she actually, right now, as we sit here taping, is 4 months out from a kidney transplant. So we had to make sure in the resolution of this case that she didn't lose any access to public benefits or Social Security disability coverage.
Explain that, please.
So when you are receiving public assistance, if you get an influx of money, a lot of times you could lose your benefits because financially you don't qualify.
Then how did you write that up, knowing in advance that they will do that?
Well, we always bring in the smartest minds we possibly can to consult. So we had people that were helping us with structures and benefit protection and special needs trusts. When we take a case, it's from cradle to the end. And we make sure that all of their legal rights are protected. So there is no adverse financial consequence to them if they need to continue to rely on public funds.
Yeah, that would seem to be an exception to the government's policy. And you were able to strike that, huh?
It's a balance, but yeah, we were able to.
Wow, that's an achievement in and of itself. So one of the takeaways of this case is you're giving advice to people who are not only employers, and I thought about this when we were writing the show up, you did such a good job. I would guesstimate that there'd be some employers that would say, can you come in and help us out, protect ourselves? Did that happen?
It has happened.
Right. He was an employee for 10 years. And these complaints, HR said they didn't get them or whatever, right? But he had a background, didn't he?
He did.
What do you tell employers about how to check potential employees before they're hired?
That they have to do a full and complete background check. We took a look at his application and the documents that were in his HR file, showing that although they attempted to call previous employers, they never got through to them, but they still hired this guy. Mm-hmm. So he was essentially unvetted, and they let him in. The other thing is he was trading some pornographic, but also some just inappropriate messages through the Kaiser chat system with other people who were working there. Why is there not other employees? If someone had paid more attention, my client wouldn't have been hurt by him, and also they wouldn't have failed to diagnose her with what was actually happening.
Right. Now the big question is, for the victims out there, many of them, as you were talking, I was thinking, because he targeted women who primarily spoke Spanish. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of Spanish-speaking or ethnic women might believe that they're not going to be believed.
Right.
right? And that's why he was targeting. They were vulnerable.
That's exactly right. And, you can get health insurance without necessarily having documents to be in this country or to work properly. And I think that's a concern. I mean, he really was targeting susceptible women because he wanted to make sure they wouldn't go report. And it's not just, immigrants to this country. All women are discouraged, whether they're privileged and Caucasian or, whatever. The culture is such that women are discouraged from reporting.
What should a person do if they're an employee or they have gone to a hospital or a store or whatever and attacked by an employee of that store? What should they do?
It can take a minute to feel ready to make that call because we're concerned we're not going to be believed, because it's scary, because we might have to, communicate in a language that's not our primary language, but we have to start the process. And it can take a while for survivors to even name what happened to them. But as soon as you're ready, as soon as you feel like you can, take a friend, take a family member, and go and report what happened.
Right.
Because we have to have accountability. When we look at recidivism rates, it's all about accountability. If you get caught and you get in trouble for what you do, you're going to be discouraged from doing it. If you get away with it, you're going to keep doing it.
Yeah. This happened basically in your backyard, Union City.
That's right.
And you and I are both members of Kaiser, right? You probably get a lot of calls from folks who was in the newspaper and everything.
Yeah, there was a lot of attention.
How do you select the clients that you eventually end up representing?
It really depends on the facts of the case, the behavior of the perpetrator, the extent of the injuries. I wish I could take every single case that crosses my threshold, but we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So if I don't take a case, I will try to get them to the right home, so someone else who's skilled can help them. But I always talk to every survivor I can talk to, even if I'm not going to take the case, just to let them know there are people who are here and listening.
Yeah, in a confidential settlement as this was, what is confidential about the settlement? Only the monetary value?
Correct.
That's it?
Correct.
So the person can talk about the case?
Yeah, I worked hard here in California to change the law, so we do have that right for survivors to be able to speak out. We can't be forced to sign confidentiality agreements with respect to the facts.
That's right. But in all of those cases, in a criminal setting, they can come forward. Well, you did a fantastic job, and I'm glad we got fighters out there like you.
Thank you.
Fighting for women and men.
That's right.
And thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.